as a recap on how a P&L works, walk me down. All right, what's top line? Revenue, right? Then what? Minus
Expenses.
cost of goods sold. And that gives you gross profit, right? Minus expenses equals net profit. Right? Knowing this puts you ahead of about 75% of business owners, more or less, people in business. So just so you know that. All right, so if we want to try to get a goal of what here? This is the interactive part of the show.
240,000.
Percentage.
Oh, 20.
Sorry. So margin percentage, net profit divided by revenue. 20%, right? Is the ultimate goal of what we want to get to. All right, so this is what I want to focus on. If we start with net margin being 20% as the KPI, what are the things that drive this? So we need to have, let's use $100,000 as our number. And so that means this would equal 20,000, right? So in order to get net margin to equal 20,000, what needs to happen up here? If we just look at from a revenue minus, if we combine these two into overall expenses, what do those numbers need to be?
80.
It starts at 100.
80.
So we need to have 100,000 here, and we need to have 80,000 here, right? So how do we drive those numbers? So think about the KPIs we talked about. We talked about net margin of 20%. We talked about billable hours. We talked about deposits. We talked about net promoter score. So how do these three help drive this number?
I mean, obviously we have to have deposits to get to 100,000.
Okay, so deposits come off of here.
Yep.
What else?
Billable hours come off of the 80 side. Or contribute to that.
What else?
If 3 people for the work.
Okay, so then that's the
Expenses.
expenses here are people. The biggest expense. Okay, so we've talked about billable hours, we talked about deposits. How does net promoter score factor into this? Referrals, right? So if you can get a high net promoter score, that means what you're doing is good, and therefore you're going to get more referrals, which is going to make it easier to get more deposits. Also, if what you're doing is good, guess what else goes up? Impact opportunities, right? So then that also leads to more impact opportunities, which leads to more revenue. Okay? So what we're after is making sure that this ratio can stay at, a 8 to 10, a 4 to 5, which means from a billable hours perspective, we need to make sure that the billable hours and the people ratio is right. Correct? Because, okay, so of all of this, let's say that people cost 40K. So if of this 80, 40,000 of that are people cost, then from a billable hours perspective, we know that if the work is, if we're at capacity, that means we need to be able to have 100,000 of billable hour work done for 40,000. So that means that now this ratio here is, so it's 4 over 10, if it's 40 over 100. So So that means for every dollar that we spend on people, we need to have 2.5 revenue, right? 4 times 2.5 equals 10. I know it's starting to get a little complicated, but it'll come together. So what this means is that we need to have, for every dollar that we spend on a person, we need to have 2.5 times that in revenue. So Greg Crabtree would call that the labor efficiency ratio. So that's for the ratio of labor dollars, and he would call it direct labor, over revenue. And so what does that mean for billable hours? That means that we need to be filling up the capacity of people. So if the people cost 40K, that means we need to be filling up the capacity of billable hours in order to maximize this ratio. Because if you don't have billable work to do, that means this ratio does what? Goes down, right? If we're doing work that we're not charging for, this is why we started doing the service tickets, because guess what? If we're not charging for a service ticket, that's time that we paid for, but we're not getting charged, that we're not getting paid for. So that's why it's so important to make sure that we're monitoring the capacity of the team. Because if everybody's at 50% capacity, then it's impossible to hit this 2.5 ratio, which is going to make this 40,000 too high of a ratio of this 100,000, which means we're really not going to be able to hit that without everyone working or just like burning out. If there's a lot of 50% capacity, there's no way that we can hit the ratio that we need to get. So that's why we need to be using billable hours as a capacity management tool to make sure that we're fully utilizing everyone in the way that we can try to get to this ratio, which is going to allow us to get to this net margin. Which means that's why we need to be monitoring Net Promoter Score so we can get more impact opportunities, we can get more deposits, so we can drive this revenue. So you can see how they kind of come together. So on your individual team spreadsheets, from your mini huddle perspective, when you look at the sales board, there's lots of activities that help drive this. You can't just go out and get a deposit. You have to do the meeting, you have to do the events to get the meetings, to get the fact findings, to get the proposals, to get the deposits. So that's the activities for the sales team. What I'll challenge all of you to do is on your weekly KPIs that you're going over on your Net Promoter Score are what are the activities that will drive Net Promoter Score? What are the activities to make sure that you can hit your billable hours? What are the activities it's going to take to get to the Net Promoter Score? Because we all need to be driving towards getting this number and this number to the right ratio, which are going to be a product of all your activities. I know this is a lot of numbers, but and a lot of arrows. So this is where I want you to ask questions. Because the important piece of this is to understand how all of these things work together in order to build on top of each other. It's which drives which. Because we can't just go out as a company and get 20% profitability. We have to go out and we have to get 100,000 in revenue. And we have to do that while only paying $80,000 in expenses. And then you go up this level to see how we can do that. And then you go up to this level to drive the activities that do that. So in order to get to the ultimate goal of this, the things that we need to focus our behaviors on, the things that we do on a daily basis are here, which means these things are the scorecard of if our behaviors are working or not. So that's our scoreboard. That's first, second, third, fourth quarter. And then at the end of the game, this is if we won or not.